everyone. Welcome back to another episode with the Crime and Coffee Couple. My name's Allison.
Hey, my name's Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Hey, at first I thought maybe it wouldn't be a good idea to have our video start with our dog licking her crotch, but then I thought, that's kind of comedy gold. So here we are with our dog licking her crotch.
You know, when you're going live and recording with a baby or an animal, there's no controlling the situation.
Well, we're not live. This is recorded.
Well, right. That's true. I don't know why I just said live.
I mean, minimal editing. Let's say it that way. So usually when things happen here, we kind of leave it how it is. So
we keep it organic over here at the Crime and Coffee Couple.
Yeah, kind of real, keeping it real. And also laziness mostly is where it comes from. For me, at least. Definitely not from your side.
Well, you're the editor.
I am the editor. I'm, at least I could do something around this place. Somebody said in the Spotify comments, man, I miss when Mike used to do some of these things. I was like, yeah, I hear you. I've heard that before, but probably not going to happen anytime soon. Like, will it happen someday? Will I present a case? Absolutely.
Sometime in 2025, you will.
We've said that before in previous years.
Yeah.
I don't think I did one all last year.
You're going to do it this year. That's the case.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see about that.
I was just telling Mike, getting ready to sit down and record a podcast episode, I said getting Mike to come into the room where we record is like trying to herd deranged cats.
Why deranged?
Because you just like, I don't know. I
was really curious what you were going to come up with because it couldn't just be cats. You got to be a little bit different.
Oh yeah, it's definitely deranged cats.
Yeah.
So it's what are we going to get to drink? We like to have coffee because we are the Crime and Coffee Couple. But if we're recording later in the day, it's going to be a different beverage. So number one is, Mike, what are you going to have to drink? Let's get that taken care of.
I'm kind of like a little child. Like you got to make sure you know what's going on and be like, oh, yeah, did you go pee-pee? Did you wash your hands? Okay, now here we go. We're going on a trip.
And then I was like, okay, come on, let's go. Let's go towards the room. And then you're like moving in the other direction. I'm like, oh, no, this way.
Yeah, I can't win them all. I'm sorry.
So we had our Ham Tuesday, and that was just lovely.
Oh, yeah. Ham Tuesday was great. We put it on Instagram. We mentioned how, like, why don't people just have ham in America? I mean, I'm sure we do. They do somewhere because people are like, we have ham on other days. And it's like, well, it just usually isn't a thing. Like, I don't remember my family really ever making a ham ever.
Like a spiral cut ham that you'd have on Easter. We always just had on Easter. And I will admit, I'm going to make a confession. I am not at all a lover of ham. And that's all I have to say about that.
Not a ham fan.
I'm not a fan of the ham.
Your whole family wasn't. And then when I came along for Easter and stuff, you guys like wouldn't have ham. I don't know why. And I was like, where's the ham? And you're like, oh, we just don't like ham. And then I found out like half your family actually does like ham. It just wasn't like a thing. So
I don't hate it. Right. But I don't love it.
Kind of like bacon. Like, do you think it just kind of overpowers itself? Like you're not a bacon gal.
I'm fine with bacon. Right. It's just... Like you just said, it does. It overpowers it. It's kind of like Mike always wants onions and green peppers on our pizza.
Oh, yeah, Chicago style.
And I just will always veto that because I'm like, that's all I taste.
Yeah, and real quick lesson for anybody that's like thinking Chicago style pizza. We don't usually eat like deep dish. Yeah, we live in Florida, but we're originally from the Chicagoland area.
Born and raised.
Yeah, so like on a Friday night, a family in Chicago, if they're ordering pizza, they're not getting this deep dish like lasagna looking pizza. It's a pizza that's very thin crust and cut into like squares.
Party cut.
Yeah, and like most of the time, the Chicago style is like sausage, onions, green peppers, I think, and mushrooms maybe.
It was very rare as a kid that I ever had the deep dish. Like if it was a special occasion, we were going to like Connie's Pizza or Giordano's, I'd be like, come on, Dad, can't I just have it?
Yeah.
And, that's what Chicago's kind of pigeonholed as being a huge, thick, deep dish pizza, but that's not typical.
No. One thing I wanted to bring up real quick, you want to tell everybody listening what you've been doing in the afternoons or evenings as you settle into like your couch. What's on TV?
Oh, yes. It brings me such joy.
I thought it might be nice to share with everybody else.
Okay, so we don't have a fireplace. So, at Christmas time, well, it's fake.
It's a fake one.
It's a fake one. But at Christmas time, you might do the crackling fire on your TV. Well, I realized this year on YouTube, they have all this, it's like called Christmas ambiance or winter ambiance. If you look that up on YouTube, they have the most spectacular scenery. Oftentimes it looks like you're maybe in the Swiss Alps. You're in this beautiful cottage. There's a fire crackling.
It's really kind of anything you can think of.
Yes.
Somebody made something for it.
It's anything cozy that you could ever imagine. And I've been putting that on our TV every single day. And I am not kidding you. It puts me in a better mood.
As soon as you said it, I was like, ooh, I'm going to write that down. That's why I was looking up on my phone what I wanted to talk about. They also have scenes like, you can look up ASMR aesthetic. Like I always put in aesthetic, and you're always like, no, it's whatever you just
Well,
said.
because our daughter had said it's aesthetic Christmas, and she's like, I never said that. It's ambiance. I'm like, you said aesthetic because that's not a word I use.
Oh yeah, by the way, we are definitely into the teenage years, so things are fun.
Ooh.
But I think I saw one that was like a Carolina coast, that kind of had a crackling fire with like water out there, and some of them have jazz. I've been really into jazz recently. I don't know why. So even though I like heavy metal and rap and other things of that nature, right now it's jazz, folks. Right now it's jazz.
It's calming.
Any suggestions? Let me know.
But I have been doing just the crackling fire, and I'm huge into Below Deck lately. I am obsessed. And I just started doing Below Deck Down Under in Australia. So hello to our Australia peeps. I now know what budgie smugglers are.
Yeah, the budgies balls, right?
The budgies.
Okay.
Well, it's their Speedos.
Okay.
And I have the hots for Captain Jason. I'm going to just say it.
Nobody wants to hear about that, right, ladies?
I'm just
come
sorry.
on.
I'm sorry, I do.
Yeah, that's fine.
But I often watch it on my cell phone with my earbuds in, just in case there's like a sex scene or something. I just don't need to worry about like our 13-year-old walking in the room. So I lay on the couch, I watch Below Deck on my phone, and then I have my winter aesthetic or ambiance or whatever the heck you want to call it. But try that. If you want a cozy scene in your living room and you have YouTube on your TV, just try it. I am telling you, you're going to love it.
All right, let's get this thing going.
So let's get into this. All right, so this is actually a survival story, which I do love a good survival story.
Absolutely. It's the part before that sucks.
Yes, exactly. So this is a survival story of Morgan Metzer. So regardless of the circumstance, maintaining a strong and healthy marriage, it takes ongoing work and commitment. Marriage involving a narcissistic partner makes it that much more difficult.
Tell me about it.
Excuse me.
What? Never mind.
To have a healthy and happy relationship. It's just that much harder. So narcissistic personality disorder is actually a mental health condition most prevalent in men, and it's characterized by a grandiose sense of self-importance to the point that the needs of those around them are ignored.
And I did now to make it about myself, if we could for a second. I definitely think like I'm a decent human being, which I think you've talked to me about like before. Like you kind of think well of yourself. I'm like, I kind of do. Like I'm decent. Like I'm not the greatest or whatever, but I'm like, yeah, if you get to know me, like I'm a pretty good person for the most part.
I don't think there's anything wrong with.
Is that a grandiose?
No, not at all. No, you should like yourself.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. So oftentimes it stems from really ultimately poor self-esteem. So it's the opposite. So you have good self-esteem.
That I do.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah.
It's often the loudest and proudest people are the ones that struggle with self-esteem. So again, it stems from poor self-esteem, and the need for control in a relationship or situation.
But now, don't these people, sorry to interrupt, but don't these people like kind of seem like they would have a high self-esteem?
Right. So oftentimes with someone who suffers from narcissistic personality disorder, their friendships are usually pretty surface level. And those that are on the surface with them tend to find them charming and, nice to be around.
Yeah. And then you like want to be around them all the time. And then all of a sudden it's like the real personality comes out and it's like, this person sucks.
Exactly.
And like we have a very close friend who was married to somebody like this.
Right. So in certain cases, red flags might not be very obvious that signal narcissism during dating and only become more pronounced after marriage. It may be the very traits that first attracted a person to their partner, such as a strong personality, confidence, and assertiveness, the same characteristics that fuel their narcissism. So being in a relationship with a narcissist can be extremely draining. It can also be very confusing, since the narcissistic person can manipulate you gradually that you start to distort reality, really.
It's a lot of gaslighting and just master manipulators.
Yes. So people who show narcissism often surround others or are surrounded by others that feed their ego. So they'll build relationships to reinforce their ideas about themselves, even if the relationships are superficial.
And a lot of these times, these people like really work their way up into companies and things.
Yeah.
Because these relationships are all superficial. So like they can, in small amounts, like impress the VP a lot and be like, oh man, this person's really a go-getter. And, I think we should get them in management. And all of a sudden, like everybody hates the person.
And that's the exact terminology is the small doses, small amounts. So oftentimes the partner of a narcissist will become gradually isolated from their friends. So what I read about it is that your partner who suffers from narcissistic personality disorder or NPD will say, I don't like this or that about your best friend, and gradually push that person away.
Because everybody's got something wrong. Like even our best friends, there's like some annoying things, but
Right.
yeah, then they focus on that little thing.
So all of this, isolation only makes matters worse. And the partner of a narcissist might also deal with gaslighting. So this is a form of control or manipulation which causes a person to doubt their own reality. This gradually lowers self-esteem and leads to feelings of worthlessness. The abuser might question your memories, even when you're sure that you're remembering it correctly. They might make your feelings or opinions seem ridiculous or unimportant. So anything you say, you're the problem. Oh, you're making this far bigger than it is. They might go as far as to flat out lie to your face or to the people around you to try to get to your family members and say, I'm concerned about so-and-so. They're starting to act crazy. So, and then all of a sudden it's very confusing. So oftentimes or over time, a victim begins to question their own reality and sanity. So dealing with a narcissistic partner can be very challenging since oftentimes they don't recognize their behavior as being an issue. It's always someone else's problem. And I listened to a podcast once, and a psychologist said, oftentimes they can't help a narcissistic client or patient of theirs because if you don't recognize that you have a problem, you can't fix it. So this case highlights domestic violence, manipulation, and resilience, and involves a partner who appeared to be a loving person but was hiding a controlling, violent side. So we're moving on to New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2020, and Morgan Metzer was spending the evening with her best friend Nicole in Canton, Georgia. The two moms were planning on ringing in the year 2021 together at Nicole's house. They were just going to have a low-key evening together, relaxing, having some wine. Morgan's 8-year-old twins, they were spending a few days with her sister in Florida, their aunt. So Morgan was now, free, kid-free at the time. So 2020 was clearly a challenging year for the entire world. We went through a pandemic, but it had been especially difficult for Morgan, who was recently divorced and now parenting her son and daughter on her own. So as the evening wore on, Morgan realized that she was just not going to make it to midnight. And that's a girl after my own heart. I can relate. Mm-hmm. New Year's Eve is a struggle for me. I'm like, oh gosh, midnight's so far. Yep. So she told her friend, I am just going to head home early. There's just no way. I just want to get to bed. So Nicole remembers giving her friend a bit of a hard time, and they're best friends. So this is all in good fun. So she was like, what the heck? Come on, we planned this. Yeah. So she wanted to ring in the new year with her best friend, but she did tell her friend, just text me when you get home. I'll see you tomorrow. So when Morgan got back home and her house was situated on a secluded piece of property, it was beautiful. She locked up the house, she engaged her security system, and she headed to bed. And only minutes before midnight, she remembers waking up to the sound of fireworks that were just out in the distance booming. She sat up in bed, she leaned over, gave her dog a kiss, and said, Happy New Year to her dog. And then that's the last thing she remembered. She fell back asleep. So it wasn't long before now she's waking up a second time. And this time she saw what she believed to be a dark figure standing in the doorway of her bedroom.
It's so scary. And she's home all by herself because her kids are gone and she's not married, right?
This is a nightmare. Yes. She is home in this large house by herself and she's waking up after midnight. So it's literally the stuff that nightmares are made of. And initially she questioned if what she was seeing was just in her imagination. You try to explain it away. Maybe it was a shadow. Maybe my mind is playing tricks on me. So as her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she realized in horror that she was looking at a man standing in the doorway, wearing all black from head to toe, including a mask and gloves. So as Morgan began to scream in terror, the man suddenly pounced on her bed and began pistol whipping her and punching her.
Holy man.
Also strangling her until she was nearly unconscious. He utilized zip ties that he had brought with him to secure Morgan's hands behind her back, and Morgan was positive at that moment that she was going to die. This is what it feels like to die. So thoughts of her children, as well as the whole entire life, her entire life to that point, literally just raced through her head. So in between these horrific, scary beatings, the man also sexually assaulted Morgan.
Ugh.
And he rarely spoke, but when he did, it was clear that he was disguising his voice. And Morgan described it as low and gravelly to the point that it sounded like Batman.
Yeah.
Like almost like this guy must have listened to a Batman movie, watched a Batman movie recently, and was taking Batman's voice.
Like Christian Bale. You're like, hey, what do you think you're doing?
Yeah.
You know, you just talk like that.
So as he spoke in this low, gravelly voice, he seemed to know things about Morgan's personal life that a stranger really would have no way of knowing. And this included her recent divorce, and he made
Was he
mention...
like talking about this while it's happening? Like,
so he said something to her that you're going to miss your husband. And she could only wonder why and how this was actually happening to her. She could not believe that this was actually happening. So the intruder began ripping her bedroom doors or drawers open, I should say. And then he was asking Morgan where she kept her valuables. And then he demanded that she hand her phone over, and she was forced to give him the passcode to get into her phone. So before Morgan went to bed that night, she used the security app from her phone to make sure that the doors in her house were locked and the system was turned on and engaged. So the app also controlled various cameras around her expansive property. And after she gave the man her phone, she heard a lock on the back door. It must have been connected to her bedroom, disengage and unlock. So it was clear that that's what that guy was doing.
and he knew that she had this on her phone.
He was utilizing this security app to unlock this door. So once the door was unlocked, the man placed a pillowcase over Morgan's head and guided her out to the porch with her hands still zip-tied behind her back. She was completely naked with this pillowcase over her head and her hands zip-tied. So before he left, he warned her not to move until she heard 2 honks of a car horn. He says if she moved before that, he would kill her. So it's likely that her screams would go unheard anyway because her nearest neighbor was a distance away. It's not like she lived in a neighborhood where you're a stone's throw from your next door neighbor. So as Morgan heard she's now hearing this guy leave, and she is laying on the porch just trembling in fear. And she is sure that her attacker is lurking somewhere out there in the darkness, maybe testing her, watching her to see if she was going to listen to his instructions and stay still. So she tried to just slow her breathing, calm down, and she focused on the sounds of a nearby stream that was in her backyard to kind of help soothe her and calm her.
Like, and you knowing full well, like you're still in a horrible situation.
Oh my gosh.
That's going to be so hard.
Exactly. So as she lay there, she was unsure of how much time had passed. And then suddenly she starts to hear the sound of footsteps in the distance. And she immediately thought that the man was coming back to kill her. She was positive of it. So as Morgan heard the distinctive creak of the top of her staircase, she suddenly heard her ex-husband's voice say, "Oh, honey, what happened?" And there is Rod Metzer. So Rod runs into the room. He is shocked to see Morgan in the state that she's in. So of course he immediately dialed 911, and soon the Cherokee Sheriff's Office responded. So during the call, I heard this, you could hear Morgan just yelling and crying and begging Rod not to leave her because she was terrified. She didn't want to be left alone at home and have this man come back.
Yeah, this man.
So as officers responded to Morgan's home, they were trying to figure out what was going on because, of course, they're hearing immediately that they're divorced. So they're asking Rod the obvious question. What would you ask Rod in this situation?
Why were you there?
Yes.
What was the reason for your visit?
What prompted you to come over randomly
in the middle of the night
at such an hour?
Yeah, this is highly suspicious.
So Rod is explaining, and this is an odd story. He's saying that he lived in a nearby apartment and he'd been living there since they divorced. And he said he was getting ready for bed and he was standing at the sink doing a mundane task like brushing his teeth. And then he heard a knock on the nearby window in his apartment. And he heard a voice say Morgan's name.
Okay, buddy. You could just stop right there. So let's just do a little DNA rape kit test here and then, see what happens from that point on.
So Rod said he was very confused by what he was hearing and he was worried about Morgan. Why would this stranger at his window say Morgan's name?
Just to be clear, there was somebody at his window while he was brushing his teeth or whatever, and they said, Morgan.
Yeah.
So they're there. Like there's nothing. It's nothing funny. It's just
No,
really
what happened to Morgan is not funny.
No,
it's
this
the
whole,
story.
So the cop's sitting there like so again, somebody tapped on your window and said Morgan Metzer, and you're like, oh, I gotta go see my ex-wife.
Yes.
This is what you're trying to tell us,
Yes.
Rod. Okay, got
This
it.
is Rod's story. So, of course, he was worried about Morgan and her well-being, so he picked up his phone and called her to see if she was okay.
So immediately I swung into action. I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to use that
Used
voice.
the wrong voice.
Yeah.
Oh, my throat's sore.
Yeah.
So, again, we're not laughing at what happened to
No.
Morgan. Not by any way, shape, or form.
We're laughing
not.
at how stupid Rod is, but go ahead.
So she doesn't answer when he calls to see if she's okay. So he was worried for her safety. He decided to jump in his car and make the 12-minute drive to her house to check on her. So Morgan and Rod first met when she was only 14 years old and he was 17. Despite their young age, it was love at first sight. The couple were married in 2009, and when they got married, Morgan was 21 years old, and she said that really Rod always treated her like an absolute princess. They had this beautiful outdoor wedding, a wonderful honeymoon, and then they went on to start their lives together, and they were loving life. So sadly, only 8 months after they got married, Rod's brother Kevin lost his battle with leukemia, and he was only 19 years old. And Rod was grief-stricken, and the tremendous loss that he suffered, it did take a large toll on him. He did turn to his wife for comfort, and Morgan was there for him. She supported him.
Sure.
And when they discovered that they were pregnant with a boy, the obvious name choice was Kevin in honor of his brother, because Kevin had said that he just couldn't wait to become an uncle. That was something that when the two were getting married, he really looked forward to it.
Yeah.
But tragically, the couple faced another loss when their baby boy lived for only 18 days. He was born early and he died from a heart defect.
Jeez, that's tough.
Yeah, tough. So Morgan described this horrible period of time as just an absolute blur. And 3 months later, Morgan realized that she was pregnant again, and this time she was pregnant with her twins, a boy and a girl. So Morgan and Rod's baby boy and girl were born in 2012, and as they were approaching their first birthdays, Rod suddenly lost his job and their relationship started to suffer. So according to Morgan, Rod always kind of had a lot of jobs. His main source of income was working as a day trader. So just as Rod's career was beginning to take a major hit, a decline, Morgan's interior design business, this is Shiplap and Sugar, it started to boom to the point that as her company grew, she was actually able to hire her best friend, Nicole, and they were able to work together. This was like an absolute dream.
Awesome.
So it was clear that Morgan's success was really adding to Rod's feelings of insecurity because he's on the downswing in his career and she's on the upswing. And because of this, the relationship began to turn toxic. And soon Rod became both mentally and physically abusive. So according to Morgan, the first time he became physical with her was over Labor Day weekend, and they were supposed to be having a fun weekend. They were away with friends. They were staying at a lake cabin, and they got into an argument, and Morgan was shocked when Rod began to beat her. And she was just beside herself. She couldn't believe that it was happening, and she immediately called her dad and asked him to please come and get her, and he did. So, however, according to Rod, it was Morgan who was responsible for her injuries. He claimed that she became so enraged and out of control during their argument that she was flailing around like crazy to the point that she actually injured herself. So Rod convinced Morgan and her family that she was so out of control that the only reason why he physically restrained her was to get control of the situation. So according to Morgan, this was the beginning of a very dark period of time in her life when she slowly began questioning her own sanity and reality. Rod managed to convince her that she was the root cause of every single argument that they had. And it took time for Morgan to recognize that she was being gaslit by her husband. And gaslighting is a term that originates from the 1938 British play called Gaslight. It's a form of abuse where the abuser makes their victim question their own feelings, instincts, and sanity. And in the play Gaslight, the husband gradually dims the gas lights of the home And when the wife is seeing this, he is convincing her that she is simply losing her grip on reality. So as the abuser continuously questions their victim's truth or accuses them of being in the wrong, the victim gradually begins to question if the abuser is right. And, I can't imagine. That would suck so bad. So as time went on, Morgan also recognized that Rod's manipulation was leading to sexual abuse. So he refused to take no for an answer. He was extremely forceful. And it was something that she didn't initially see, maybe because they were married.
Yeah, and you're like, well, maybe throw him a bone or whatever. But it's and then like then it starts to become more normalized, and then it's like, wait, like is he just like doing whatever he wants to me?
Right.
That's wrong.
She said the real deal breaker came when at one point he even threw himself down the stairs. And like literally rolled himself down the stairs and the kids were home, and he turned to the kids and said, "Look at what mommy did to me."
Jeez, what a psychopath.
Yeah, awful. So in 2020, Morgan made the decision to file for divorce, and then their divorce was finalized in December. This was just before the home invasion and attack.
Yeah, it happened on New Year's Eve. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So when investigators arrived at Morgan's home, it was 3 a.m., now in the early morning hours of New Year's Day, and they immediately saw red flags in Rod's behavior. So one of the detectives was saying, we show up and we're walking up the driveway. He's sitting by a car and he like yelled something inappropriate out to them, like, "You better effing solve this," or something like that. And the detective was like, "Whoa, buddy, like we're here to help this situation and you're being like extremely hostile."
Yeah, you're overacting a little bit here.
Yeah. So right away they were like, this whole thing is so strange. So while they spoke with Morgan, they saw just how brutal her attack had been. Her eye was black and blue, so bad that it was nearly swollen shut. She had bruising on her face, her neck.
Well, yeah, getting hit in the face with a gun will do that.
Just terrible. She still had the black zip ties around her wrists. And the brutality that she was subjected to really made the investigators think that this had to have been a crime of passion, that there was a lot of anger behind what happened to her. So as Morgan began to recount the events of that night, she believed that she had only been bound on the porch with the pillowcase over her head for maybe 15 minutes. But when they really broke it down, it had been twice as long, 40 minutes. But that's just kind of goes to show the amount of trauma she went through, that she had absolutely no sense of time.
And she was putting herself in a different space too. She was trying to lose herself and just kind of trying to calm herself down. It sounds like she did the best job she could.
Right, like cope and survive. So soon Morgan's brother and father arrived at her house after she called and told them what happened. And the detectives kept Rod outside and they brought Morgan inside because they wanted to talk with each of them separately.
Because they know, they're like, okay, this is odd.
Right. And it's anytime you suspect any kind of abuse, you absolutely want to separate the victim from their abuser because they're not going to be open because of fear.
Or coaching or whatever.
Very much so. I remember I was in school. I was in my dietetic internship and I was just helping a lady out and shadowing at a diabetes clinic. And I could tell that this woman was in an abusive relationship. And I didn't know what to do. I was so young. And the lady I was shadowing, I didn't think handled it properly, but it was just sad to see. Yeah. So of course now Rod is out of earshot. So Morgan has this sense of, security. She's sitting with this detective, and right away she told the detective that she believed it was Rod who was acting as her hero that had actually been the person who had done this whole attack. So when the attack first began, Morgan made the assumption that there was a stranger inside of her room. But when the man told her that she was going to miss her husband, she said she doesn't even know why she said it, but she begged him not to hurt Rod, and she said that she loved him.
Ah, smart.
And looking back, again, she says she was unsure what prompted her to say it, but at this exact moment, she said that the mood suddenly shifted in the room, and it was the first time she felt a shred of hope that this man was going to allow her to live.
Well, there was a shift in his reactions, I'm sure, like a little softer, a little not,
yes.
I'm not going to kill this person.
Right. But it was this moment solidified that she believed it was Rod when her attacker helped her out of bed in order to guide her to the porch. So what happened was, of course, she was pregnant with twins, and, it's uncomfortable. At the end of your pregnancy, you're so large and it's hard to get out of bed. So oftentimes Rod would jump in and help her get out of bed. So it was a very familiar feeling to her. So now this attacker who's in the darkness of her bedroom is helping her out of bed.
The same way.
Same exact way. And she said that's when the light bulb went on.
Like, it's like, everybody's different. And it's like, it's almost like it put her back into that spot where it was like, wow, this is exactly how he used to help me out.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. So she, of course, is recognizing that this has to be Rod, but she, of course, said nothing to let him know that she believed this to be true, because she had no idea what he would be capable of doing. He's just snuck into her house and beat the hell out of her and sexually assaulted her.
Yep.
So Morgan told the detective that earlier that week, Rod contacted her out of the blue and told her that he had pancreatic cancer. So according to Rod, she was the only person that he had told thus far. So, she is hearing him say this. Of course, she's going to want to support him.
Sure.
This is the father of her 2 children.
She's a nice person.
Someone she's been with since she was 14 years old.
Can't just be like, well, hope you die, Rod.
Right. So, she immediately rushed to his side and he showed her the paperwork from his doctors. And to offer him comfort and support, Morgan allowed Rod to stay the night on the sofa in her living room. And he ended up sleeping on the couch the entire week. And I'm positive that Morgan was like, okay, like this is getting out of control. And, she was just being bogged down by him because he was relentless. While he's staying in her house and she's trying to be nice, he's relentless and trying to convince her to get back together with him. So she was absolutely firm on the fact that this was not going to happen. So now it's the morning of New Year's Eve, and Morgan could no longer handle his persistence. And she said, look, Rod, I know right now I'm your only source of support. You haven't told anyone else. You need to tell your parents. You gotta, tell them about your diagnosis of pancreatic cancer. And he's telling her, no, I'm not going to do that. And she said, well, I'm sorry, but you can no longer stay at the house. So he left. But regardless, he continued to text her throughout the day. And his persistence continued as he told Morgan that he would earn enough money so that she didn't need to worry about working anymore. Again, convincing her to take him back. So during their text, Morgan lied and she said that she was going to spend New Year's Eve at her parents' house and stay the night. And she turned her phone off to get a break from his ongoing contact with her because he was just texting throughout the whole day. So when Morgan realized that the detective who's sitting across from her listening to her story actually believed her, because she had gone through this marriage where she continuously doubted herself and her reality and her sanity. And now she's got this person that can help her, believing her. And that was just such a tremendous relief to her. So with the information that Morgan provided, detectives turned their attention to their one and only number 1 suspect, Rod Metzer. So investigators were puzzled by the fact, number 1, from the get-go, like we said, that Rod had just shown up randomly to her house after midnight to just so find her being brutal, or after the fact that she had been brutally attacked. So then they learned that Morgan had texted him and said, I'm going to be staying at my parents' house for the night. Even more so, why would you go over there? If you believed that she was spending the night there, she wouldn't have been home. So when questioned, he claimed that he was only worried for Morgan's well-being when he was unable to reach her. So as Rod sat on the porch, he willingly gave investigators his phone, and they quickly found a file that was hidden on it.
I know what I know. I'm telling my truth. Telling my truth.
There's no way in hell somebody knocked on your window and said her name, and then you immediately come over here because you're going to check on her. And she happens to be bound in a pillowcase over her head by a man who is disguising his voice.
Stand up. Stand up. Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not kidding you. Stand up. No joke. Come on.
He's such an idiot.
And all of this is captured because Morgan has a security system. So you can actually see him on the porch. And they find this hidden file of nude photos of Morgan on his phone.
Well, I mean, it was his wife.
No. Based on the images that the investigators were looking at, it was clear that Morgan was not aware that these photos had been taken. So then they find photos of text conversations between Morgan and another man. And because it was clear that this was a violation of privacy, Rod was taken from Morgan's front porch in handcuffs.
Okay.
So while he was in custody, because of course they can't definitively say he was the person that came into her house and attacked her, but they're going to try to hold him until they can get a search warrant, because they don't want him to go back to his apartment and get rid of evidence that could be valuable in this case.
Right.
So it was clear to investigators that Rod wanted to act as Morgan's savior that night, swooping in to be by her side after she had been brutally attacked.
Yeah, sweetie, where are you? Did you
Right.
get attacked by somebody that pistol whipped you and sexually assaulted you in your room?
And a very attack that they were positive that he was responsible for.
Yeah.
So they turned to Morgan's security system, hoping that they would find evidence from her cameras that proved their theory.
No, because he knows about where all the cameras are.
Right. So unfortunately, the footage during the time of the attack had been erased. So the footage would have captured him walking up to the house that night.
Yeah.
But he knew how the system worked. And it was likely that when Morgan handed her phone over and he unlocked the porch door, that was the time that he erased the footage that would have been incriminating.
Sure.
And apparently when he did, it erased it from the cloud too. So there was absolutely no capturing it. And this attacker took Morgan's phone with him, and the phone has actually never been recovered. So as investigators walked the perimeter of Morgan's house, they very quickly saw the point of entry that her attacker got in through the house. Because, of course, we know that it's cold outside, the windows are shut, and she's got this great security system. So this person had gotten in through the basement window. So they saw right away that the sensor on the window had been manipulated so that the alarm didn't sound as the attacker climbed in. And since Rod had been staying with Morgan up until New Year's Eve, it was very obvious that this would have been his opportunity to go to that window and do what he did. So footage from after Morgan's attack was recovered that depicted Rod arriving at Morgan's home to be the savior. So he, of course, is showing up, feigning worry for her well-being. And when she didn't answer the front door, he walked around the side of the house, and you could see him and hear him in the footage being like, "Morgan," into the night. And they're like, why would he call your name out like that in the night when all your windows and doors are shut? She was outside on the porch, so she would have been able to hear him.
Right.
So the fact that he called out, it's like, it's because he knew she was out there.
Yeah.
It's just all solidifying that this is totally him.
Yeah.
So there was also footage from earlier that night when Rod stopped by and he dropped off a check for $56,000. So he placed the check under the cushion of a chair on the front porch. I saw all this footage. And Morgan wasn't home at the time because she was over at Nicole's. And then there's later footage of Morgan coming home from Nicole's house, and she went out on the porch. She grabbed the check and brought it back inside, and she put it on the kitchen counter, and then she went to bed. Next thing she knows, this masked man is in the house and attacking her. So by the time the authorities showed up, this check had vanished. So then investigators are looking into Rod's finances, and they realized that had Morgan kept this check and tried to cash it, it would have bounced. He was completely broke. He did not have the funds to cover this check.
Yeah.
So by the following day, investigators obtained a search warrant for Rod's car and his apartment. And as they entered his home, they quickly discovered a clear bag that contained black zip ties.
Okay.
Morgan's attacker arrived with these zip ties. They were pre-looped. It was clear that they did this ahead of time so that when he was in the darkness of her room attacking her, he could quickly just place them over her wrists and then just tighten them. So one of the zip ties found in his home was from a partial piece. So you could tell he trimmed the zip tie. So, of course, investigators have the evidence of what was found on Morgan's wrist because when they arrived, the zip ties were still there around her wrists and in place.
Okay.
So they're looking at the zip ties from Morgan's wrist and realizing that a piece had been cut. So they take the zip tie from Rod's apartment, and it's a perfect lineup match to the piece that had been cut.
Okay, that's good.
Yes. So now they're confronting him with this evidence in the interrogation room, and he's sitting there in his chair all smug, denying any knowledge of these zip ties, as he says to the investigators, "There's something funny going on here." Basically alluding to the fact that somebody is trying to set him up and somebody has planted evidence in his apartment.
I've been framed.
I've been framed, officers. So there was also a book that they found inside Rod's apartment, and it was titled 7 Ways to Be Her Hero. The one your wife has been waiting for.
Should have probably read that earlier before you started beating your wife.
Right? So then they searched his computer, and investigators found highly incriminating evidence that Rod had looked up how to change the sound of your voice, how long to choke someone unconscious.
Man, you gotta wipe your computer of that stuff, man. It's like, that's 101.
How to crack an iPhone password, how to get sympathy from your ex, and cancer letter from hospital. So investigators learned that Rod had created a fake email account in order to create the fake letter from his doctor regarding the pancreatic cancer diagnosis. He also constructed fake medical bills to prove that he had paid for these treatments. Rod was completely cancer-free. He did have type 1 diabetes. He did not have pancreatic cancer.
Big surprise.
So it was clear that he concocted this idea in hopes that Morgan would be sympathetic and she would take him back. It makes me think of the Real Housewives when Vicky's boyfriend, Brooks, made up that he had cancer. You have to be a very sick individual to do such a thing.
And also kind of a loser. Like, I don't know, like a woman, I mean, nothing wrong. If somebody actually has cancer, they'll feel bad, but it's just like, I don't know. I don't think that's the way to go about it.
Well, there are people that are dying and suffering and fighting cancer every day.
Yeah.
And then this jackass wants to just get sympathy from his ex-wife. How about you treat her well while you're married so that you don't have to jump through all of these hoops?
Yeah, too little, too late.
Exactly. So Rod was charged with 10 counts, and this included home invasion, aggravated assault, kidnapping, and sexual battery. Rod's mom was convinced of her son's innocence and believed that the investigators had simply made a mistake. However, the evidence only grew, and there was already a lot of evidence, but it only grew. So when investigators scanned the UPC code from the bag of zip ties that they found in Rod's apartment, they could see that it was purchased at Lowe's. So of course, they're going to see what area Lowe's are in the vicinity of Rod's apartment. And very quickly, they found footage from one of the local Lowe's that on December 30th, a little bit more than 24 hours before the attack, there is Rod checking out at the counter, buying these zip ties. And the other thing was, it was 2020, so everyone else in the footage is wearing a mask, and there's Rod without one, so you can clearly see that it's him.
That worked out well.
So when the security footage from Rod's apartment was then reviewed, investigators saw him coming back to his building after Morgan's attack in the time frame that would have made sense. He was walking very quickly. He looked a little hairy and disheveled. And then 4 minutes later, he left a second time. This time he was wearing different clothing and different shoes. So this was at 1:24 a.m. and would have lined up with him going back to Morgan's to be the hero in this scenario.
Yep.
So as he was walking out the door, he could be seen in the footage holding a plastic bag. But unfortunately, investigators never located this bag, so it was very clear that he dropped it and discarded it somewhere along the way to Morgan's house. They assume that it held a lot of incriminating evidence, but again, it was never recovered. Neither was Morgan's phone, so we don't know where he chucked that or when.
Right.
So Rod went on to agree to a plea deal, and with this plea deal, he had to plead guilty to 14 counts against him. He was given a 70-year sentence that included 25 years in prison and 45 years probation at his release.
Oh, that doesn't matter.
So during his sentencing, Morgan was given the opportunity to address Rod, and she spoke of the hell that were the last 4 years of their marriage. And, you know, it gave her strength to do this, to stand in front of him and speak these words. And it really gave her a sense of power, a power that she hadn't felt through their marriage in a long time. And it gave her a sense of relief, and she spoke with strength and conviction during this statement. And according to Kathy, this is Rod's mom, Her son has not allowed her to come and see him in prison. She's assuming that he's likely fearful of what she'll have to say to him. She very much worries for his health. It sounds like from what she was saying, he is not taking care of himself.
Who cares?
And the fact that he has type 1 diabetes. So she said he is declining, and
Good. Die, man.
she, as his mom, I should say, she is fearful he is going to die behind bars.
Yeah, but also as his mom, I mean, he should probably die anyways, right? I mean, he's a monster that raped somebody and all that stuff.
I mean, what he did to Morgan that night, it's unforgivable.
Yeah, your son should die, so just let him die. I think it'd be better for everybody.
I mean, I can't speak as harshly as Mike, but
You sure you can. You can say it. Go ahead. Say
No.
let him die. Just say it. Let him die. Let him die.
I like to really try to spread positivity. I really do. That's like my mission for 2025 is to not talk crap.
Spread positivity to Morgan. That's
Yes, 100%. I agree. I just don't sometimes think negative plus negative. It's still
I do.
negative.
It's okay. We're yin and yang. It's
We're
good.
yin and yang.
Yeah.
You know me. I'm just a ray of friggin' sunshine over here.
Real quick, was there like a rape kit or anything that was done?
They
or-
didn't mention that in any of the research that I
Okay.
did.
I'm just curious. Maybe they had some relations, because obviously they had a long relationship and he was there for a while.
No,
staying
I
there.
don't believe anything like that happened when Morgan was just letting him stay on the sofa for support.
Okay.
She was very firm on the fact that she did not want this guy to have any hope that they were going to get back together.
Yeah.
So I really think during that time he was staying on her couch. It was literally just him staying
So
on the
maybe
couch.
he wore protection or whatever.
It's very much possible,
Okay.
yes. So really at this point in time, Morgan wants others to recognize the tiny red flags because oftentimes it isn't one huge red flag. It could be a lot of little red flags that begin to accumulate over time and they can add up piece by piece. She wants victims to be aware so that the abuser doesn't have the chance to continue to gradually chip away and thus making the issue more out of control. Because abusers can be extremely sneaky and manipulative, their victims gradually begin to question every part of the reality to the point that they are unable to differentiate what is real and what is true anymore. And Morgan admits that this started to happen to her. Oftentimes, a victim becomes isolated from loved ones, fearful of speaking up because of guilt or shame. The manipulation morphs into more guilt so that it is the victim who feels that they have done something wrong, therefore unlikely to share, believing that they're the ones that are at fault in this situation.
And then you're falling into the trap that they made for you.
Right. Slowly but surely, you're falling into this trap. So Morgan has made it her mission to turn her pain into something that is powerful, that can help other women. In 2024, Lifetime released Gaslit by My Husband, the Morgan Metzer story, and this is inspired by Morgan's relationship with Rod and her brutal attack. And if you or someone you know has been sexually assaulted, please call the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-4673 or the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE, and that's 7233.
And if you think that there's a possibility that you have been sexually assaulted by your loved one or significant other, I mean, obviously, you might want to bring it up. If you're afraid of bringing it up, then you're definitely getting sexually assaulted. If you bring it up and they get angry, you're definitely getting sexually assaulted. Like anybody who loves their significant other will be like, "Oh, I didn't mean that way."
Yeah.
Then they'll take it and be like, "I definitely didn't mean it that way," or whatever. Like, not that I've been in that situation,
Right, but that's the thing, though. It might be that the victim is afraid to bring it up in fear of what could happen.
Yeah.
More abuse can escalate because of that. Like, what do you mean? You're accusing me of doing such a thing?
Yeah.
And then there's just retaliation, and it's that much worse. So really, I think the best bet is to confide in a support system and get some professional help that they can guide you to a safe situation, because by all means, we are certainly not the expert in this case.
Yeah.
But that is the, brave story of the survival of Morgan Metzer.
Yeah. Well, I always love a survival story because they survive. But again, the story beforehand is always horrible. So and what's so awesome about like victims like Morgan, you took this as an opportunity to spread, stories so other people just don't feel alone. And yeah, that's so strong and so awesome of Morgan.
Yeah, because that's the abuser's goal, is to isolate their victim and make them feel so small that they feel like they're living in this little world that there is no help around them. That is their goal.
Yep.
And that's why people like Morgan are just so brave because they've been through it and now they want to help other people who are still in it.
Right. And hey, real quick, those of you listening, if you like what you hear and you would like to hear more, you have access to over 100 episodes of bonus content.
Oh, yeah,
So,
definitely over 100.
Go ahead, become a patron or an Apple subscriber, and you can join Apple subscriptions for free for like 3 days. So go give it a shot. It's January. Let's get crazy, right? Let's get a little nutty. If you're going through dry January, you're probably saving money, not going to bars. Go ahead and throw it at the mom and pop over here. We're just a local, everyday crime and coffee couple just doing podcasts once a week.
Who are you?
I'm Pa.
And I'm Ma.
That was a good one. I like it.
Thank you. Every once in a while,
Yeah.
I got to add something to this table.
Yeah, why don't you wrap this up for us?
But yeah, so we were talking about it today. Like Mike and I are the little coffee shops, the local.
Yeah, so everybody likes to go to Starbucks, McDonald's and Chili's and all those sort of things.
Because you know
Ruby
what you're going to
Tuesdays.
get.
Yeah, you know what you're getting. But this every once in a while, it's like, hey, you know what? Let's support a local business here. Like, let's support somebody, a podcast that might not be part of a gigantic network like a lot of the big ones out there that are just making cash everywhere, pulling things
We're
everywhere.
just little fish swimming in the sea.
We're not driving BMWs. We're not even driving like Toyotas or any of those things. So if you have some extra scratch, we'll gladly take some. And then you get yourself some bonus episodes. It's helping everybody. Everybody
give
helps
and
each other.
take.
Yeah, a little bit in the tip jar, if you will. So
Yeah.
come on over to Patreon. Come on over, be an Apple subscriber. We'd love to have you.
But either way, we appreciate you being here, listening, and we love you guys. And until next time, bye.